as a marketing. I almost said marketing ploy, but we don't want storytelling to be marketing ploy. I don't think that's the the intent on any of this. I think we want to be sincere and honest. Would that be correct? Our resident experts here, Tom and Gail.
It's a marketing technique.
There we go. That's better.
Yes.
That's a better word than ploy. I've obviously been reading something. Uh, okay, I'm just leave it at that.
Although some people do treat it as marketing shenanigans, but that was part of the discussion in the chat.
I like what yeah, Gail, you'd said something about some of these stories, if you will, about the founders. You know, I mean like the stories of they were desperate and in need
Now,
and
it's always the same story. Two founders started the company in their A, dorm room, or B, garage. It's always the same, right? So I kind of doubt it. And on top of that, like, it sounds like they were just ordinary, everyday people who go into college, like poor kids or middle class kids. And then, we've got like Bill Gates, whose mom actually knew the guy at IBM, that's just why he got the contract.
hmm
Right. Not the innocent I'm a college kid who got lucky story. It's the American dream story, right? The problem is that I'm old and cynical, and I don't know how often it could even be possible to become the American dream if you didn't have connections, right?
well, exactly. Like Amy Grant. I love Amy Grant. I'm not here to be down on her or anything, but I remember being a little kid. I'm younger than Amy Grant, but I thought, wow, she was found when she was 14 and she wrote music and like what is it, a grape song or whatever, which is cute for a 14-year-old or maybe an 8-year-old or whatever, but it's not what you're going to hear on top 40 or whatever by someone in their 20s. But anyway, cute song. But I thought, wow, okay, so if I write music when I'm 13, someone will hear it and produce me. Well, then you find out later, yeah, her dad was connected. He was in the music industry and someone knew someone over here and maybe she wrote something and a producer happened to hear it, but honey, your parents knew people.
Yeah, so that's the thing is that the stories make it sound like, that they were just everyday, ordinary people. And I've had a lot of debates with people over the years about the unknown benefits that people have that they don't recognize, right? Like the person whose parents have money and paid for them to get SAT tutoring and practice tests and tutors all along and all these other extracurricular stuff they could do don't understand how much that benefited them compared to the kid who's got a working mom and no dad and
Mhm.
can barely read and the teachers don't care. And I mean, it's just like it's not the same. And I'm not saying it's impossible. There are lots of people who started out severely disadvantaged who became very successful. It can happen. You have to work really hard at it,
Mhm.
but it misleads people to think that, like Amy Grant's story or
Mhm.
the founder's story, that they were just your everyday average kid hanging out in college and built this $1 million business with nobody's help. They just did it, right? It's
Well,
just
that's like people talk about the Kardashians. And, when you think about it and you say, well, what are they famous for? Well, they're famous for being
being
famous.
famous. Exactly. That's all they're
It's
famous
like,
for.
they've done nothing remarkable in their entire lives except hang out with rich, famous people. Uh, so I don't give them any credit at all. I can proudly say I understand they've had a TV show for a really long time, and I have never seen a single episode. Nor do I care to. I mean, there's nothing that draws me to them in any way, shape, or form. Now, you want to do a TV show about somebody who worked their way from the bottom up, the stories that talk about that, and you got me. I'll watch
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
Right. But that's the only reason that happens, though, is that people want to watch that crap. I don't know why. Right. So there's things I would watch. Like I watched The Prophet, Profit. not the other kind of profit. Because, they were stories of small business and how they were struggling, and he would help them, hopefully, it was real, help them turn things around, right? Those kind of storytelling, I like to do that. But the people that fawn after famous anybody, I don't get it. It does not impress me. It doesn't impress me that you have millions of dollars, especially if it's daddy's money and you don't even like you're busy losing it all, right? The generational wealth that the generation before worked really hard for.
Mhm.
Yeah, those kind of stories don't impress me. And we were talking about the insurance stories, the insurance companies. If you read between the lines, they have some really hateful messages for us, or they dumb down their commercials. That woman and her, let me tell you how I afforded this car. I cringe every time I hear that. I'm like, ugh. How
I'm
many
with you.
people say that?
When I hear about emus or geckos or dropping
Bugs.
pianos on people or flow and who's the boss, and I'm like, this means nothing to me in terms of insurance.
Does
As a
that
small
count?
business owner, I have insurance issues. Clearly, it's my largest expense. I'll put it that way. And so, yeah, you give me a good solution to insurance, and I'm all ears. But I can't even watch their commercials. I'm
Does
At
just
that
least
count as storytelling? Because that I don't count that as
At least
storytelling.
we know. Well, you know what? Though, at least Flo was entertaining at the beginning. I think they took it
well,
on
true. I mean, it's
for
it's a
too
serial
long, but
story. It's an
yeah, but it goes
ongoing.
on and on and on. But I mean, at least it was different and entertaining and got your attention, and you knew she was selling insurance. The
Mhm.
commercials that blow my mind is when they're over and I have no idea what the heck they even sell.
Yes,
What
yes. Thank
is the
you.
point of that commercial? I don't. How could that possibly help them when I have no clue what you are selling?
The emu and the piano and the mustache that moves. Like what the huh? That's
I'm
all
with
I
you.
remember.
Now we're talking about the paid advertising storytelling, and that is certainly one flavor of it. And Gail, I loved your example of the Clydesdales. That you're right. Those Super Bowl commercials and the horses and the Dalmatian dog. I mean, those are great stories, and we remember those. But more importantly, I think in small business marketing, we need stories that are relevant to the client, situations and pain points that they would experience. And I know I hate to bring it up every time, but when I researched the leadership book, that was one of the things I spent the most time on, was trying to find relevant stories, anecdotes, hopefully true ones. But if not, sometimes you tell a story that may not be true, but if it isn't, it should be. So you tell the story to illustrate a point. And even when I teach people to do storytelling in the communication piece of leadership development, one of the things I tell them is go read Aesop's Fables. Learn to tell a joke, because what is a story? A story has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and the end has some point to make, some memorable aspect to it. And so we all remember the fox and the grapes, and the lion and the mouse and the thing in his paw. And we remember these stories, and they remind us of a message that's a good message to remember. And so I encourage people to get a book on anecdotes. There used to be these big, thick books on anecdotes. I've got 3 or 4 of them on my shelf, because there are good stories and they make a point and they stick with people. And if you're in any business, one of your jobs, in my view, is to put those stories in the mind of your client or potential client. Because when a problem erupts, there's a lot of things going on, a lot of things disturbing them, a lot of things in their head. You want your name to pop out and say, oh, this happened. I heard a story about this. Oh, yeah, that story. That's the person who told it. I better call them. I mean, that's the immediate string of thought you want to plant
Very
with
good
them.
point. Very
Right?
good
And
point.
small businesses, I don't think they understand this very well. Your about page is the one page of your website that should be about you, as opposed to the whole rest of your website should be how you can benefit your potential customers or clients. But the about page is really important. And when I used to do pay per click, for e-commerce stores. It was really obvious that conversion rates were higher if the potential buyer visited the about page first before they checked out. And so your about page should tell the story of your company and your people and have pictures of your building and your people doing something so that you look real and not one of those fake sites somebody threw up to scam someone, right? And so every small business has stories, but a lot of small business owners are humble and don't really, they're not really understanding the importance of sharing what happened in your life that made you want to start this business. There was something that was bothering you. There's something you needed. You couldn't find anybody to give you what you needed, so you made it, right? That's your company's story that you should be relating, that your customers can relate to because you went through it. You found a solution. You know your solution works because it worked for you and other people you've worked with it. And so that's the kind of story, right? The first story you need in your small business is how you came to have that small business. Why do you have that business? Why do you still do it? Why didn't you throw in the towel when it got tough, right? There's got to be a reason.
So how do you encourage people to do that? I mean, they probably know how to tell their story, but how do you say, hey, quit being so humble, get it out there? I mean, I know
Well, it's
I
not
have
that
that
hard.
same, I have that
Yeah.
trouble. It's like, I'm thinking, oh, no one wants to hear that story,
Yeah,
so I
no,
don't
it's
share
not that
it.
hard. You just explain to them the conversions, the importance, and if necessary, interview them, get the information, and write it for them.
I was going to say, otherwise you offer to interview them on your show, and you put it together and then say, wow, look at this. People love it. And they say, oh, can I put that on my website? Absolutely. But you
Right.
have
See,
to
a lot
finish
of
it so it's available.
that's the thing. Andy Lapata is a brilliant guy. Wrote a bunch of books. My favorite
Mhm.
one was Get Recommended, right? And basically, lots of people know you, but if they don't know enough about you and what you do, they can't refer anyone to you. They can't recommend you. They don't know what you really do, right? I love one of his lines. I don't know if it's from a book or a video that said, everybody knows Oprah, but Oprah doesn't know you. So what good does that do you, right?
That's a good point.
You have to make it easy for people to understand what you do, or they cannot recommend you. And referrals and recommendations are the easiest clients to convert. Super easy, right? Tooting your own horn. It's like
Quotable.
all the MLMs will tell you don't toot your own horn. You have to, toot somebody else's horn, basically. Yeah. And so it's not that hard. You just have to get the information out of them and then put it out there in an interview or a video on their website somewhere.
I've had this conversation with people that I've met on social media, and sometimes the discussions are, I got to be honest, are disturbing. I remember one person in particular, and I said, I see you here, and you contribute, and you seem to know what you're talking about, but what do you do? And they said, I help people bring happiness into their life. And I'm going,
Huh?
okay, so
Why?
does a hooker, but I'm not quite sure you necessarily want to promote yourself that way. And it finally got to the point where I said to him, I said, okay, here's $500 this month. Okay, I'm going to pay you $500. What are you going to do for me? And they couldn't tell me. They couldn't articulate it. And that's sad. It's very sad because they should have an immediate story to say, well, with one client, or if I had my ideal client, sometimes you got to start out somewhere, and you say, for that amount of money, that would equate to this much of my time. And in that much time, I could, whatever it is, build your website, develop a marketing plan, edit your videos. Deborah, you and I have had this discussion.
I was just going to say, yeah.
Whatever it is, but the point is, when you and I talk, there are tangible things that you can and have done for me. But sometimes people don't have that. And you say, well, why are you in business? And they say, well, I always knew that was the way to make money. And I'm going, well, then tell me how you make money. We do the same thing at our larger clients. Sometimes it's fascinating. You walk through the halls of a large client and you just turn to somebody and say, how does this company make money to pay your salary? And it's tiny percentage of people even know. And these people should be your top marketers. There should be stories just permeating the culture of any company so that when somebody says, what do? You don't just say, and I've had people do this in my field, well, I do contracts. Yeah? What does that mean? I don't know what doing contracts even means. You tell stories and say, well, we had a client and they had this contract and the contract had this problem and we were able to help them renegotiate it or file a claim or whatever the case is. And it increased their bottom line. There's some magic words for you.
Right there.
Story should include statements like that. But
Metrics
you're right. When you say people don't know how to tell a story, and it's sad. To me, it's very sad sometimes.
Yeah, but
That's
you
something
give
Anna
that
Scheller.
person, don't give that person $500 because they don't even know what they would do if you paid them.
And that's the point you make to them.
Right?
Anna Scheller helps.
You can't do it. Who what?
Anna Scheller helps with that, with her USA Biz Party. Shout out to her for her chat, because she always has what question is it? Is it number 5 or is it number 7?
In 7 words or less, tell us what you do.
Yes. And when she had that, I'm like, wow, I have to think of that. So I had to really work at it. And I wanted to have a different one each week that was related, but just, kind of change it up as far as the words, but still have the same thing, but see which one worked better as far as people responding. But I love it because it really makes you think of that elevator pitch. How can I do this in 7 words or less? That's a great question that she has.
Don't you find it disturbing when people don't know what they do? I remember going into a county building, working on this lady's terminal, and I said to her, so how long have you worked here? She said, 13 years. I said, what do you do? She goes, I fill out this form. I said, well, what's the form for? She said, I don't know. You've been sitting at this terminal filling in this form for 13 years and you have no idea what the form is for? How is that even possible? You'd have to be brain dead, right? I would have gone nuts way before 13 years, but it just blew my mind. She had not only did she have no idea what the form was for, she had no interest in anything to do with it.
She's not a curious type.
She was just data entry and that was it. And I'm like, but how you'd think like you'd accidentally figure out what it was for after 13 years. It blew my mind. It really did. I just shook my head and said, wow.
Not everyone's curious though. Some people are comfortable with kind of that widget task where I do this, it just goes into that and that's fine. And then I go home and I'm paid and I can get my groceries and go on and do it next week.
Well, yeah, we honestly do need people that like to do repetitive things, right? But it's still just hard to believe you would never accidentally figure out what you were doing for the county, right? After all those years.
Oh, it's for the county?
Yeah,
that's what the county prefers to have people.
Yeah, Riverside County in California.
But
the Riverside County was stupid, right? They were the dumbest county ever. They built this giant building. They didn't put enough power in it, so every time they needed some new equipment, they had to discontinue something or buy something that was more energy efficient because it didn't have enough power in the building. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part is they had no parking. And so all the people that worked for the county would go out every 1 or 2 hours to try to move their vehicle. Because there was 1 hour parking on the street, there was 2 hour parking on the street. And all these people that the county is paying to be productive go out every 1 or 2 hours to move their car.
Yep.
And I'm like, that is truly ignorant, right?
That's not just Riverside, though. That's
really stupid use of their employees' time.
Yeah, that's not only Riverside.
Has stories, but they're bad stories, right? You want to have good stories, right? You want good stories. And people, a lot of small businesses and consultants even, they don't explain well what they do. They need to, you know what? If you don't know what you do, I have a tip for you. Ask your customers.
If you have any.
Customer what they think you do. Yeah, if you have any. Ask your customer what they think you do for them, or ask them to review you so you can read your Google reviews or your Yelp or Merchant Circle or wherever reviews to find out what their customers think you do for them. It's sad. It is hard to stay in business if you don't know what you do.
At least harder. Maybe some people do kind of by accident, but definitely harder. It'd be easier to stay in business if you knew what you did and you're making money. Earlier when we were talking, when I mentioned Amy Grant, to her credit, and not just Amy Grant, but anyone else who doesn't realize that they have a leg up in whatever it is success that they had and that their parents were connected and so forth. I did have an experience where I went to Canada, and I went in and I was interviewed by Prairie Radio, the Bible college, with the biggest Bible college in Canada. And I went in there and I had the interview, and I've been interviewed before, so this is no big deal. And they introduced me. They say, "Yes, we have Deborah E. here, and she is from one of the Grand families." And I'm like, "What?
Huh?
I'm from one of the Grand? What do you mean I'm from one of the Grand families?" It's like, "Well, one of the founders of the Bible college." It's like, "Well, yeah. So my uncle was one of the founders. Big deal." It's like I did not know until I was introduced on the radio station that was a big deal, because I just grew up knowing that my family was integrated into the Bible college, and I kind of just took that for granted, thinking, well, everybody's related to people at Prairie Bible College, and that's just who I am. But it didn't occur to me, because even now, Michael will be driving people, and someone will come from Canada. It's like, oh yeah, it's a little bitty town, and the only thing that's there is this big college. He goes, yeah, my wife's family. She's related to the people that started that college? Wow. And it's like, well, I didn't know it was a big deal. I didn't think of it as a big deal. It's just my aunt and uncle, and may they rest in peace. They're gone now. But I mean, I think that sometimes people know people that know people, and they don't realize that that's an advantage. So to just kind of give them a break, I don't think they realize that has given them a break in life.
Right. Well, if they want to tell that story, it would have been good if they had given you a heads up in advance. So you'd know that was a big deal, so you'd be prepared. It'd be good to be prepared for interviews like that, with surprises like that.
I just went with it, because as soon as they said that, it was like, oh, that was just my aunt and uncle, and I just used to crawl up in their lap or whatever when I was a little girl, but I guess that's a grand family. Okay. Yeah. My favorite aunt is part of but yeah, I just went with it, and then found out later that was the deal. So didn't know I had a break. Didn't know I had a connection. It was just my auntie and uncle. I mean,
yeah. See, now you have a story you could tell, at least to Canadians in that town. So
exactly. And everywhere else that's heard of that Bible college.
Heard of that, yeah. So everybody needs a story, but they may not be able to find their own story. They may have to get other people to tell them parts to come up with the story, right? Because
exactly,
people are weird. There's people with a very narrow life, right? And then there's other people that it's like you have your jazz music, and you have your social cafe, and you have your writing, and you have your technical stuff, and you have your hosting. I mean, you have a very broad background. And so honing in on what part of the story to tell for a particular thing would be complicated. So some people have a broad background, and they had to figure out what piece of the story to tell. And other people have such a small footprint, like, that they have to find a way to expand the story that they tell. And they may have lots of things they could say, but they don't think of them. But people who know them will know. It's like I said, ask your customers, ask your clients, ask your family, ask people you've influenced, or your church, or whatever people know you best can tell you more about you. Right? Things that you may not remember, especially if you're older, right? You may not remember all the things that might come into play into that story.
Maybe start a list too. Even if you are on in years, start a list of when things happen. Put them in your idea list or something, where this, at some point, record a story or write down a story that you can add to your website and your about page, whatever.
Well, now they can go look at their social media or their blog or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the chat history, whatever. But yeah, so everyone has a story, They just may not realize that anybody cares about their story. And I think that's the thing. Most people don't think anybody will care about their story, right? But your story is what gives you a connection with other people, right? And you need to identify with other people in order to have relationships, business or personal. You have to
Fully
have some
agreed.
kind of connection in life, right? And you may not know what it is. It's even like, let's say you're an insurance agent. If you ride motorcycles, you have an in with motorcycle people, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're a race car driver, you might have in with sponsors of race car drivers, right? You have to think about who would be interested in that piece of your story that would relate to whatever it is you do. So instead of being, I want to sell insurance to everyone, you want to sell insurance like there are horse insurance agents, people that know about how to insure horse properties and horses and training and that kind of thing, right? There's motorcycle agents, there's people who sell insurance for, apartment buildings or whatever. So your story should have something to do with the niche that you want to carve out, that has something to do with your background or interests, that give other people a reason to identify with you, right? Because if I know 20 real estate agents, which one do I recommend? There has
The
to be
one you
some
know.
reason. Either they're local or, I've used them or whatever, right? But that's what your story does. It just gives people a reason to identify with what you're doing and what you offer.
Exactly.
And with that, we are at the close.
And is that a cue for me to do my little thing here?
Well, given Gail said she had to go tend to her little beasts, and we are kind of at the end of the hour.
I accidentally. And thanks for tuning in to Social Cafe Interactive Live. And we will see you same time next week, same place. Thank you. Thanks, Gail. Thanks, Tom.
You bet.
Thanks, everyone. Check out socialcafe.net/calendar.
Thanks, Gail.